Folks, this is Tom Opry, your host to the podcast where we ask the tough questions regarding man's impact on the world's wildlife. Raw and unfiltered, we strive to help you fully understand the real issues at hand. Our goal, ensuring the world's wildlife and wildlife habitat exists forever. Stay tuned for another edition of Shepherds of the Wild.
All right, so Scott, tell me where we are and what this place is.
So this estate is Ferran Eleneerman, and that's on the Isle of Skye in the south part of the island. Larger estate of 23,000 acres of a mix of farming and crofting tenure on the estate.
Okay. And this estate, what is the economic model for this estate?
So it's kind of always been crofting is prevalent in the area along with farming, but over the last sort of 40 odd years we've kind of grown the sporting aspect through stalking, shooting, fishing, and growing new activities for our hotel guests to kind of get involved in out in the landscape.
And would the alcohol be part of that?
Yes. So we produce our own whiskey and gin here as well on the estate, and that the whiskey's been going now since mid 1970s.
Okay. Tell me about the deer stalking here. Explain to me what you guys are doing. What is the management plan for deer here?
So all deer that we manage on the estate, first and foremost, is for the welfare of the animals in the habitat that they reside in. From that, we can take a sporting aspect from that, where we can take clients out who want to hunt in this landscape. So each year I will perform a deer count to get an idea of the population densities, sex ratios on the estate. And from there I can decide how many stags we want to cull for the coming season and how many hinds we want to cull as well. So that gives me an idea of how many guests I can fit in through the sporting season.
So how many, so to kind of give you an idea of what the population, the size is like, I'm looking at 23,000, 350, 400 stag. Kind of tell me about that. And then, your objectives, population objectives, both on stag and hind.
So roughly we have about 300 to 350 red deer over the 23,000 acres at any one time, which is not a high population at all. So we'll probably cull about 12 stags a year, maybe a couple more depending on what we've got with youngsters coming through, and we'll look at between 40 to 50, again sometimes a few more hinds throughout the season. This then gives us a kind of a revenue that we can utilise not only from the sporting aspect of people paying to come and hunt, but then we can look at the value from the carcass. So what we've done here is kind of cut out the middleman in terms of game dealers that would traditionally buy the carcasses from the estate, which would then be sold on to other parties. So what we do here is we see the whole economic value of the carcass. So once we've had a successful day's hunting, that carcass then will be butchered in our own facilities that we've invested in by a person we employ locally to do. And then the value of that carcass, that butchered meat, goes through the 2 hotels that we have on the estate at meals. And we also package some of the cuts up as well so we can sell to the local community.
So it sounds like you guys have a lot going on out here. So could you give me some idea of what the economic impact is as far as how does that help families, numbers of people, families, and what are the resources that this provides? And are there schools and healthcare? How does this all work for helping out the community?
So from my side of the business, which is to be part of the land management team on the estate, if we're just looking from a deer stalking point of view, that employs myself. It employs seasonal gillies through the stalking season, which means then that all kind of feeds into the bigger picture of the estate, with the whiskey and gin, with the hotels that we have, food and drink. So it's kind of looking at the bigger picture. It's not just one thing that sits on its own. It's part of that whole hospitality industry that we're involved in.
So, I guess since we're talking about communities and so forth, there's a lot of competing interest out here. Can you give me an idea of what it makes it difficult to manage this estate as far as the wildlife goes? And one thing we didn't, let's do that right now. As far as the wildlife, what are the real issues here as far as being able to manage this, whether it be local, regional, or countrywide?
So again, looking from a deer management perspective, a lot of the challenges we're currently facing is with the Scottish Government and the deer working management group that's been put in place to come up with some proposals for Scotland's deer. Some of those proposals, will have a negative impact on those who are directly employed in managing deer, and especially in the traditional kind of sense for a sporting regard. So it's trying to get government officials, the wider public of Scotland to understand that agreeing to these new kind of proposals will have a direct impact on those who are employed in the sector. It doesn't just affect myself in a job, it affects my ability to live here, for my children to live here. We live in a very remote rural environment. If those proposals were to be put in place, there could be instances where people in my kind of role may have to move on if they want to continue in this sector. That means you're taking people away from the places they've perhaps grown up, worked in for a long time. That intrinsic link to the landscape is lost forever then.
Excellent. We didn't really get into this, but what is this landscape? Describe it to me and tell me a little bit about what I'm really getting at is that by managing things the way you do, get into the biodiversity.
Yeah, we've kind of, the topography here is a mix of crofting and farming. So a lot of the low-lying areas will be managed field setups, going out onto the higher ground which is for further grazing of livestock, and then we get into the high ground. The ground on this estate doesn't rise much above 1,000 feet, so it's not huge high peaks, corries and glens, but it's very undulating, challenging to try and manage and eke out a kind of an existence from that. So yeah, it's kind of putting all those things together and maximising the use of that landscape, but it's done in such a way that it has a positive knock-on effect for the wider environment, the wildlife that we have here. What we've done here in the last 40 plus years with a lot of woodland creation that we've done, we've seen the benefits from that now, and we continue that trend. So yeah, it's kind of working hand in hand with tenant farmers, our crofting communities, to look at a bigger, longer picture down the line.
Explain this woodland to me.
So the woodland schemes that we've been creating here for the last 40 years are native woodlands. So these are woodlands that perhaps would have been in these areas many years ago, before kind of farming agriculture impacts took over that landscape for grazing and things.
Could you give me some perspective instead of many? Could you just say maybe 1,000 years ago, 2,000 years ago, and explain to me why you were able to have that type of woodland here?
So I think a lot of these woodlands were probably disappeared 4,000 years ago, Iron Age, Bronze Age period, when farming was becoming the major source of food and livelihood for people many years ago. I've just repeated myself there.
That's all right.
Yeah, so it's. So I've lost my train of thought right now.
So what I'm trying to get at is it's been a heck of long, but the seed beds existed for all this time, and now because you guys have stopped the sheep from overgrazing these things, and I really want you to extend it. A lot of people think it's the deer, but it's the sheep, and that's what's causing these wildlands not to revitalize themselves. So, and then explain to me, this is what we have.
Yeah,
what is a native forest kind of thing?
So with the woodland creation that we've done, it's all native woodland schemes. So these are trees from a seed base that is in that landscape currently. With removing grazing pressures from a certain area, it's shown that the seed will suddenly take, and then you've got the potentials, the beginnings of your new woodland. What we found is that if you fence these areas off, reduce the grazing pressure significantly at the beginning. The uptake of the seed is quite high. What we've done here is, over a period of time, is allowed the deer back in, which has had next to no negative effect on the tree expansion, but we've kept livestock out still. So we found that the pressure from browsing is not necessarily deer related. It can be more high stocks of sheep that can be the biggest kind of pressure on these areas.
Describe these native forests. Give me some idea of the types of trees that live in them, and just some idea of longevity.
So the kind of mix of trees we have on the island is predominantly broadleaf. So we've got things like birch, alder, willow, rowan. These are kind of trees that really take first. Those are what we see coming through in these enclosed areas, followed by ash and oak and elm start to come through as well. Hazel being another one. We've then started to see over a period of time other species coming through that you don't tend to see huge numbers in other places. So it's kind of you've got to look at the long game as opposed to instant woodland. We've got to look a lot longer than one generation. We've got to look at 2-3 generations down the line.
So the biodiversity, I haven't heard you use that word. So what has happened with this? It's kind of like you're rewilding before rewilding was cool. So what has happened with the biodiversity of animal life and insect life, whatever, in these areas that you guys are managing?
We found that with the woodland creation and the expansion that we've done, we're seeing corridors being created, which means we can start to get, especially with the roe deer, were quite significant in being able to move about from one side of the peninsula to the other. And traditionally, we hadn't seen roe deer in one area, but now that woodland expansion, that creation, has given the stepping stones that they need to go into other areas. We've seen that lots of bird life, raptor life, owls. Now we've got lots of barn owls. Tawny owls, we're seeing long-eared owls, short-eared owls. This hasn't had a negative effect on moorland raptors either, because we've been very kind of sensitive where we've had woodland creation, as not to impact on things like golden eagles, hen harriers, sea eagles, which we have in abundance here. They're very much part of this landscape as well. So
you guys offer some bird shooting for woodcock, and obviously a lot of these raptors. I mean, there's a rap on gamekeepers killing raptors and predators and stuff. How does predator management work into your overall scheme, and what do you do to make sure that you're doing it right?
We have to look at what we're trying to achieve with the landscape as a whole. Predominantly, I'm managing foxes is my kind of the predator that I seem to be dealing with the most throughout the year. Then we look at things like.
But why? Explain to me why.
First and foremost, for me, it's to do with ground nesting birds, wading birds that we have nesting here. The knock-on effect from that is the crofting community have a benefit from predation to livestock. So it kind of works hand in hand, with the management of foxes. That has a knock-on effect for livestock farmers.
So how do you manage foxes?
So throughout the kind of spring months, I'll be working on the dens throughout the daytime, and then it's kind of out with a lamp at night, thermal imaging equipment to maximise being out at night time amongst the lambing fields.
Okay. And explain to me why the fox are in the lambing field. Kind of give us a real down and dirty. This is the reality.
Yeah. So once the lambs are born at the same time as predators, foxes in particular, are having their young, and it's through. They're doing what they do. They are a fox. They need to feed their youngsters, and when there is this abundance of have extra food source on their doorstep, what you tend to start seeing is predation on livestock, on lambs in particular. So it's kind of, we have to get out there and manage foxes to a level where impacts on crofting ventures is not impacted significantly. It doesn't make it viable anymore. We want to see foxes in the landscape. They are part of the landscape and intrinsically linked to the overall cycle of things, but it's a managed working landscape, and we have to manage predators in such a way that impacts and losses are not felt significantly to crofters and farmers.
So would you say that the reason why there is a healthy population of predators, namely foxes, is that's because of the excessive domestic animals, sheep that we have in the landscape in order to feed man?
Mm-hmm.
So it's unnatural for us to have all these domesticated animals on this wild landscape. So
I suppose having an excess of a food source at a particular time of year is of benefit to certain predators, whether that's eagles, foxes, pine martens, mink. Even otters will predate on young lambs as well. Not to say that's a negative thing in as much as they're doing what they're doing. The negative effect is felt by those rearing that livestock. We're trying to kind of find a balance within a working landscape that kind of first and foremost suits the wildlife, has a benefit to them. We don't want to wipe out everything. We want to ensure that we have a healthy kind of suite of things, and predators are included in that, but we've got to find that balance as well. So yeah, it's kind of it is a challenge, trying to manage and juggle all those things, all the different needs.
So at this estate, again, I can't remember how to pronounce the name of it, but Sir Ian established this in 1972. Could you just give me a little history on Sir Ian, and kind of you had some years to spend working here when he was here. What kind of person was he, and how did he manage this as an aristocrat?
Yeah, I mean, I only got to know Sir Ian in his later years when I came here. But yeah, from the short time I kind of spent with him, you instantly knew that this was a man who really knew what he wanted to do, where he wanted to go. A man who kind of was really passionate about the Gaelic language, the Gaelic culture, and understood that you need, for that to succeed, you needed people in the landscape, you needed people to take pride in their language and their culture. If you've got people with passion and pride, they tend to thrive. So that was his driving force, getting communities to really buy into this whole concept of really championing the Gaelic language, the culture. Once you've got people passionate about that, people tend to be much more passionate drive to achieve things in this kind of environment.
So what did he do with this estate? I mean, what did he spur here?
He created a thriving hotel. Again, employing lots of people in the local area. That's been a big draw for local people as they've grown up since the 70s, always been a part of the hotel, a part of the estate. Creating the Gaelic whiskies in the mid-70s, again, that's been a great success story, which employs people full-time. And on the estate side of things, he also understood that you had to have gamekeepers in that landscape. He saw that as an intrinsic role to conservation, and he was at the time when gamekeepers were disappearing off the island. He understood that he wanted to be the person that would employ full-time conservationists, and that was in the role of a gamekeeper.
Green Lairds, who are they? Give me a definition of who they are and what they're doing to these rural communities.
So Green Lairds are kind of, it's a new buzz phrase, new buzzword for kind of organisations and companies, as far as I understand it, want to buy up tracts of land and have a carbon offset from their company, their manufacturer, whatever it is. It seems to be a trend that's kind of happening in Scotland just now, that land estates will be brought up, and it's kind of a trendy thing to offset your carbon. They can do that by peat restoration. More often than not, it's woodland creation. But again, that kind of, from how I see it, comes at a cost to the people in the landscape. That estate may have had traditional roles in its land management. They've been there for a long, long time. And some places have removed those people and removed those roles. So yeah, it's kind of, I'm not against carbon offset. I'm not against people diversifying landscapes that they own, but it shouldn't come at a cost to people, local communities.
And how do you represent that cost?
People disappearing from the landscape. Ultimately, once people are gone, it's not a community, it's not a landscape anymore, it is just a piece of wilderness. The Highlands and Islands of Scotland isn't a wilderness, it's a very managed landscape. And people have been linked to it for thousands of years. So you remove the people, you remove the heart and the soul of that landscape.
Could you say if you remove the people, you remove the heart and soul of the Scottish Highlands?
Yeah.
Okay.
So if you remove the people from the landscape, you remove the heart and soul from the Scottish Highlands and Islands. Yeah. So I'm a gamekeeper, and my role here on this estate is to kind of manage the landscape, be part of a land management team that works with local communities, local other stakeholder interests. But also we live in a time where we need to have jobs in these areas. We need to have families in these areas. That having that role allows me to do that. It allows me to bring a family up here. And as a gamekeeper, I'm very proud of that position, and I am the last gamekeeper on the island.
Okay. Excellent. Trying to remember, Tony, is there anything we were talking about you thought that was?
Yeah.
I mean, I know we talked about. We talked about what happens if you guys are gone. I mean, we didn't really get into what's going to happen to the landscape if you guys are gone. I think we talked a little bit about that this morning. But is there anything that?
The only thing, did you, when he introduced, did he say how long he'd been here? And sort of,
no, he didn't really quite do that either.
Does the role that you play here and when it started, and put it in some context. I think the people that are going to see this, I don't think they have a context for this. Mm-hmm. They don't know they don't know. Even if you describe Gamekeeper, they'd be able to say, okay, well, so I don't really know, but
well, you're kind of like a combination of a wildlife biologist, a game warden, and a government trapper.
I mean, I feel like if we don't have your equivalent in the US per se, but I feel like your job is really holistic in a sense. Right? It's not like they hired you as a gun, like you were saying before. Everybody thinks I just go kill shit. Yeah. So that's kind of...
Yeah, I mean, I can describe what the traditional role was back when it first came about. I've been part of this estate now for the last 15 years. I took over as head keeper just a little over 10 years ago. And the role of the gamekeeper is a kind of a jack of all trades. You have to, in its modern conception, you have to be you're an environmentalist, you're a conservationist, you work in the hospitality industry because you're bringing in guests for hunting, shooting, and fishing. So it kind of, you have to be many roles, you have to wear many hats now in this role as a gamekeeper in the 21st century. It's not all about sporting interests anymore. It's about a much broader spectrum of roles that you have to try and encompass into that now.
Does that cover you, think?
Yeah, I mean, I like the one thing that I think is really interesting is almost like you're not necessarily, you talk about ambassador, but it's more like you have to have the skills to be able to talk to people I don't even know how to say it, but almost like back them off the cliff, right? Like, oh, you're freaking out about this thing. Well, I can't just come in and just like, boom, dispatch this animal.
Yes,
we have to build a relationship. So I don't even know.
Yeah, maybe you could talk about just, what is a typical client you have here? Or just give me some idea of the clients you have and how you build a rapport with that client. Mm-hmm. Because most of your business is repeat business, right?
Yeah, sure.
All right, so, like good outfitters, that's the reality there. So maybe just tell me a little bit about what it takes when a new client comes in and how you build rapport with them and what your expectations are and letting people understand the service you provide here for these people, your customers.
So most of our clientele now with the stalking is return guests that we've had for many, many years now. We've built up such good relationships and provide such an experience that people want to come back time and time again. So we do get new clients coming in on a yearly basis. So it's really trying to get them to kind of buy into what we are here, what we do here. It's all part of that experience that we want to kind of showcase to people. And it can take sometimes a few outings with them throughout the season that they want to come, whether that be woodcock shooting, whether that be red deer stalking out in the hill. Because the experience that we offer doesn't just start and finish with myself out on the hill. The minute they arrive in the hotel, we want them to be greeted by nice, friendly staff. We want them to be catered for, looked after. Then they have their experience, their day with me, and then we want to bring them back to the hotel where they're desperate to tell somebody that they've had such a great day, a great time, and we want our staff in the hotel to take the time to listen to them. So, for me, it's all about that whole kind of relationship building, the experience above one aspect of their outing.
So, if you were going to compare what you do and how you do it to some other occupation, what would it be and why?
I would say it's hard to compare to another occupation because it's quite a unique role, what we do. But I would say that the skills that you have to have is you have to be a people person. You really want people to kind of warm to you. You're spending a huge amount of time, often just the two of you, out on the hill, close proximity, talking about something that both of you are very passionate about. So you have to have the good people skills. You kind of have to be a bit of a storyteller. You have to really, it's showcasing what you've got and putting that in front of people. I can do all that. The real star is the landscape. That's what really sells to people coming here.
So the Lady Noble, is it Noble?
Lady Noble, yes.
Lady Noble. Tell me about her relationship with you and how does she fit in this equation?
So Lucilla is great. She has been my boss, like I say, for the last 10 years now, and we have a great working relationship. Lucilla has faith in me to be able to take certain aspects of the estate in a direction that I would like to see things moving forward with, and she has every faith in me to do that, which is great for me because it gives me the confidence to really push things that generally other estates probably wouldn't try and look at. So that means we can just we can go forward on things, and she gets very much involved with what we do. She's very keen to see all aspects of what we're doing out in the landscape, things we want to do. We sit down quite often, we'll go over studies and things that we do, whether it's the deer count, carving, censuses, that kind of thing. She's very much hands-on involved and likes to be outside as much as possible with me.
Excellent. I guess, so what's the most difficult part of being a stalker here and a gamekeeper and what is the biggest real problem here?
It's trying to, I would say, fulfill everyone's kind of wishes that they have for your position. Some people within various areas of communities on the estate see my role as purely there to reduce deer numbers, cull foxes, reduce hoodie crow numbers, and there are some people on this estate who've moved into the area that kind of, despise you for managing anything. So it's trying to find a real balance, and that can be the most challenging thing at times. Often a lot of my kind of chats, talks, interaction with local communities can often be a negative one, because they're impacted by something, whether that's foxes taking lambs, whether that's deer incursions into gardens or crofts. So it's very much trying to get people to be able to feel that they can come to me, can talk, and we can work out these things. So that can be a real challenge. It's a real juggling act sometimes.
So there's a lot of people in the UK that don't think anybody should be hunting anything.
Yeah.
What do you say to those people when you're online on your Facebook page or Instagram and somebody's posting something about, hey, what the hell? You're terrible. You're evil. What do these people need to understand, and why do they say those things?
So I think there's a lot of people around the world who don't quite understand what we do in terms of wildlife management, landscape management, and if someone approaches me with a sensible question about why do I do these kind of things, or a negative remark about what we do, the default thing I go to every time is I will invite them to spend the day with me, or longer if they can. There's an invite there to come and spend time with me, because I feel that is the only way you can educate people to landscape management. It's easy to write something on social media, a comment, but more often than not, that will just go back and forth. The invite is there. I will often invite people to come and spend time with me, and people have took me up on that, and they've gone away with a much, not necessarily going to agree with hunting as a sport in regard, but they go away with a much better, deeper understanding about landscape conservation, environmentalism, and how the role of the gamekeeper fits into all that.
So why do you think these people don't understand?
I think it is born out of ignorance. I think it's just something they've kind of they've heard elements of, but it's usually the negative side of things, because they've seen it from a sporting regard, a sporting aspect, but not understanding that deer are managed, and that we will be culling a certain amount anyway throughout the year. So we can make an income from that. If we're culling X amount of animals, then we can bring people in who are passionate about hunting, who will pay for that privilege, because it is a privilege to be out in this landscape hunting these animals. And then that means that the knock-on effect is jobs down the line, and it's a healthy food source that's put into the food chain.
So what happens if you can't hunt anymore?
Well, you lose people firstly, people from the landscape. That's gone. Jobs are gone. Families disappear. Your schools start to close down. We can't all be wildlife guides. That just isn't a reality. But then the landscape will start to suffer as well, because it's not just removing hunting or people from a small area. To have a rewilded landscape, it would need to be a much larger area to be in a much more natural state. Rewilding small pockets just creates a vacuum, so there's always going to be human intervention there, human management at some level within that landscape. So yeah, people have always been in the landscape. It's not a wilderness, it hasn't been, never will be. Whether you take forms of agriculture away from it to rewild it, as the buzzword is, at some point people will have to step in. So there's always going to be people there. It's all about how we want to manage this landscape, what is going to keep people in the area, and what is going to keep that landscape at its healthiest.
What is your ultimate dream for your life, this estate, your family?
For me, I want to ensure that deer are my passion, so I want to make sure that deer continue to thrive out in the hill that I help manage. and that at some point when I have to pass that baton on, the next person from me takes that into consideration and continues that work. I took it on from someone, and I want someone to take it on from me with the same kind of ethos. I'm hoping that might be one of my children one day. One is showing an interest in that. So you never know. One day that may mean that child stays in that area that she was born and grown up in, and can continue the work that she's been a part of all her life.
Excellent. Anything, Tony, you want to add?
You know, one more thing. Maybe you already talked about it. So I was really moved or interested or understood when you talked about earlier up there on the hill. You were saying that you were bringing in this back to this kind of holistic concept, whereas the farmer whose interest is in cattle is like, he doesn't care about. Maybe that's an insensitive way to put it, right? But
yes.
It's like the thing is your responsibility, as I understand it, is, you know, it's not just, it's everything. It's all of this stuff.
Yeah.
Whereas the other occupations around may have a narrow view of things, and their interest is in, all I need is to maximize grass for my sheep.
Yes.
And you're looking at that as you have to balance that with 1,000 other things that go on.
Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of, to me, that was like kind of a little bit of an awakening for me. Like,
I know it is. I totally get it.
Yeah, that if he's already talking about
he hasn't gotten to that point. He's hinted around at all his edges, but yeah, if you could say something along the lines of, you know, I mean, it's complex out here. I mean, in my position, I have to juggle a lot of different demands from a lot of different groups of people. For instance, farmers, you know, or the farmers.
We talked about gardeners and things like that.
Yeah. So we'll try that.
Yeah. So the role that, you know, I'm employed here to do, you know, it has a lot of demands placed on it through different stakeholders in the landscape. You know, we have those that utilise the landscape for grazing, agriculture, and we have those that people in the community that grow vegetables, grow crops, and have gardens. And all these things place demands on the landscape, and with my role it's trying to look at all of the issues, all of the landscape, and try to kind of then find an equilibrium between all of that. Whereas you know, one stakeholder may have a narrow view. That's what I'm looking to do with this landscape, and that is, you know, what I need to get out of that landscape to make my business viable. So it's kind of then trying to, you know, work with these people to understand the bigger picture. It's not just whether it's grazing sheep, growing things in your garden, and deer impact and upon that. It's about trying to get everyone to understand the wider picture of the health of the landscape.
Okay. I can't think of anything else. Anything you want to add?
I can't think off the top of my head.
Any word of advice you want to give anybody in the world?
I'm trying to think, because I'm always kind of with youngsters. I do a lot with youngsters coming into the industry. So
you know, what we didn't talk about was your simulated stalks.
Mm-hmm. We've got an activity called simulated stalking, and that was all born out of how can we educate the general public on deer management at a time when deer are being portrayed as a negative impact on the landscape. So we came up with this idea of a simulated stalking experience, which gives you kind of 6 stalks. Each one gives a different challenge. But between each stalk, we can talk about deer management, the difficulties with it, the realities with it, and what we do here on this estate. And what we found is that people that that have tried this activity then often want to book a day for the real thing the following season, because they've gone away with a better, deeper understanding of deer management, of what it entails, from someone who's actively involved in it, not from watching something on TV, radio, what they've read in a newspaper. So it kind of really is an educational piece. And when you put this into a fun activity, people tend to buy into it a lot more.
Are deer bad for the environment? And
No.
I want you to answer the question: deer are not, or are?
Yeah. Deer are not bad to the environment. Deer are part of the environment. It's how we manage them within a working, managed landscape. Deer have been here since the ice retreated, and man has lived alongside them and utilised them while they've been here. And within my own culture, the Gaelic culture, there are many stories, many songs, poetry of how we revered them in history. My own clan crest is a stag's head, and there is a big story behind why we have that. So we are interlinked with deer. It's just in a modern day and age, we're starting to go down a road where we're talking of conservation, environmentalism, that deer are negative, and deer are not negative on the landscape. They just need the correct management.
Why is the stag on your crest, your family crest?
The stag's head is on the Clan MacKenzie crest, and it all goes back to ancient kings of Scotland, where the then clan chief saved the King of Scotland from a baying stag whilst out on a hunting trip, and was granted that crest as part of his coat of arms. Our current clan chief is known as Carbafé, which means the deer's antlers. So we're, again, culturally, we're interlinked with the animals.
Excellent.
Thanks for listening. You can find this podcast wherever great podcasts live, including on the Shepherds of Wildlife Society website at shepherdsofwildlife.org. Please tell a friend, and let's save wildlife together.